have money that they too are hoarding.
That we should not have 24 million people in this country who can't find a full-time job, that we should not have 50 million people in this country who can't see a doctor when they're sick, that we shouldn't have 47 million people in this country who need government help in order to feed themselves, and we shouldn't have 15 million families who owe more on their mortgage than the value of their home.
Now, after 30 years of having our living standards decrease while the wealthiest 1% have had it better than ever.
A lot of the especially large companies that have a lot of business overseas are looking towards their overseas markets rather than the domestic U.S. markets to expand. As a result of that, they may be making a lot of money, but they may be putting that money to use somewhere else outside the United States.
A declaration of war on the poor.
It almost seems like this is becoming a third world country right in front of my eyes in our generation. Like, how is this happening?
You see people losing their homes all across the country, and I feel like it's time for people to finally take a stand and really, fight back.
I had to take on a second job and catering. Everybody is working twice as hard for less money now.
The fundamental question of any democracy is what is the relation between public interest and the most vulnerable?
Vital services like public schools, senior centers, health care are all under threat here.
I mean, look at all the vets that you see on the street corners. They fought for our country. Yeah, you see more and more and more homeless people, vets, and now it's not only the vets, it's us standing on the street corners asking for money, and that's wrong.
Today what we see is regular Americans pitching their tents, sometimes in the shadows of downtown Sacramento's skyscrapers, in the hopes of basically buying more time, or simply because they just don't have any other choice. The shelters in and around the town are absolutely overflowing with people.
You do need a government, but the government has a very limited role.
We have too much regulation. We have too much litigation. You can't compete in America because the U.S. government has erected too many barriers.
In many ways, Milton Friedman was a devil figure in my youth in a Keynesian household of economists because he seemed, with his emphasis on individualism, freedom, and markets, to be so unconcerned with fairness.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Don't try and stop the foreclosure process. Let it run its course and hit the bottom, allow investors to buy homes, put renters in them, fix the homes up, and let it turn around and come back up.
Don't blame Wall Street. Don't blame the big banks. If you don't have a job and you're not rich, blame yourself. Profits are being produced, wealth is being produced, hemorrhaged at the top, no fair distribution of that wealth or profit for workers.
Corporate profits for the last quarter were the highest ever.
Corporations are people, my friend. We can raise taxes on, of course they are. Everything corporations earn ultimately goes to people.
Non-financial companies have socked away something like $1.84 trillion in cash and other assets, but they're not spending them. They're not hiring, they're not building plants and other infrastructure.
And the manufacturing sector actually eliminated positions. At the same time, cash-strapped cities and counties kept on cutting their workforces.
We keep hearing that companies have a lot of cash on hand. So how do you square that with the decision not to put more people on the payroll?
Well, there's really a disconnect between companies earning money and the company's stock prices and how they spend it and where they spend it.
30 years ago, Laura, as you know, we were, this country's, our GDP, manufacturing was about between 25 and 30% of GDP. Financial services 30 years ago was 10 or 11% of GDP. Those numbers are almost flipped now.
Who controls the system? Is there another way? But what is really the design? If you don't like capitalism, if you don't like traditional socialism, what do you want? And then how do you get there? Free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? I think you're taking a lot of things for granted.
And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us.
Well,
I don't even trust you to do that.